back. The Agent and the Fan podcast. I'm Chris Leible. I'm the agent. I'm with my man, Lou Columna. He's the fan. What's going on, Lou? How are you?
Not much, man. Hanging in there. Little league season is starting. The kids are playing. I got one of my boys also playing lacrosse, so it's been pretty busy. I know you've been busy.
Yeah, my little guy has played in 11 games in the last 10 days, baseball
Damn.
games. He's going crazy. He's 9, and so he's been really busy. The big one's been doing a lot of practice. We're out there all the time, and we're having a blast with it, and the kids are having fun and trying to get them better. And it's been a fun. We've had some nice weather here in New Jersey, so we've been trying to enjoy it, and it's been good. But there's a lot going on that we need to talk about today, right, Lou?
Oh my God. I mean, listen, there's so many things going on. Before I go into any of that, though, I gotta say, my cousin put me onto this show on Netflix, The Night Agent. You gotta get into that.
Okay.
It's amazing. It's actually,
what is the premise of the show?
So it's an FBI agent who stopped a bombing in DC, a train bombing in DC, and then they fast forward a year later, and there's like a whole conspiracy theory about it and who did it, and because he ran after the guy, he didn't catch the guy, he just saw the guy's tattoo. But it's a great show. It's 10 episodes, but it was amazing. I mean, I saw it in 2 days.
Really?
I saw it in 2 days. Yeah, it was. I was like hooked. Between that and and Ted Lasso, I've been on my streaming kick for the last couple of days.
Now, do you stream it on your phone, or you on your iPad or something, or you're getting on your screen?
It depends. I do it everywhere, man. Like if it's funny, like if I'm actually in bed, I have a TV in front of me, but I'd rather watch it on my tablet. If I'm in the living room,
I'm the exact opposite. I
have to
have it on my giant. I like to watch it on the big screen. I don't like to watch it on my phone or my tablet or anything.
No, there's certain things I could watch. Like if I'm watching like a crime drama, I can watch it on the small screen. But if I'm watching like Top Gun, it has to be on my 70-inch. It can't be anything less. So it depends what I'm watching.
So what's the name of the show?
The Night Agent.
The Night Agent. All right, gonna have to check that out.
I think it's the number 1 show on Netflix, as a matter of fact. But it's pretty
Interesting.
cool. And they kind of left like everything. They leave the door open for like a second season. So that one's pretty good.
Well, Lou, the good news is today I have a special guest coming on. It's an old friend of mine. His name is Ken Davidoff. I think a lot of our viewers will know him. Ken is a longtime writer. Most recently with the New York Post. I've known him for a long time. He wrote for 25 years. He just recently retired. This is his first year not working in the business. He's a great guy, and like I said, he's an old friend, and we're going to have him joining us shortly, and it's going to be good to kind of catch up with Ken, see what he's up to now, number one, but also just kind of talk about his career and kind of get some perspective on what he's done and some of the things and personalities and teams that he's covered.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, no, I followed him, because I'm as you know, I'm a Yankee fan, and he did stuff with the Yankees with the Post. But he's a really intelligent guy, and I loved his writing. Yeah. That's what I will tell you. Like when he put a story on, it was like, he told it like it is, which I appreciate.
Yeah, no, Ken's a good guy. He recently invited me to lunch. We had a nice lunch, met up together, had a nice lunch, caught up, which was great. But it's going to be great to get him on the show. And when I asked him if he'd come on, he was like, no problem, anytime, let me know. So, it'll be good to catch up with him. But before Ken joins us, which should be soon, I know there's some things you wanted to discuss. Let's talk, because there's a lot of stuff going on in baseball right now, and also in football too. Should we start right in football? I know you want to talk about something in football.
Yeah, no, I mean, just the Jalen Hurts contract, I think, is, the big story, right? The last couple of days. Not so much for, I mean, listen, for the guaranteed he got, yes. But I think it's, more so is that what does this mean for the 2 other quarterbacks, Burrow in Cincinnati, and the kid in San Diego. What does that money? Yeah, what does that money look like? That's going to be interesting to see. Kind of like, I mean, so you got to pay the quarterbacks, right? That's what it is. No matter, you got a mediocre quarterback.
Jalen Hurts, got benched at Alabama and didn't come into the league with a whole lot of fanfare. And he took this job with the Eagles, and look what he's done with them. I mean, you got to give the guy all the credit in the world, and he's earned every penny that he's going to make on that deal. It's a tremendous contract for him. I'm really happy for the guy because I feel like he's earned it, and he seems like a good dude, and he certainly is a great athlete. And you know, to lead a team as a quarterback is something special. So good for him. And look, I hope, of course, I'm an agent. Of course, I want to see Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, who are two of my favorite young quarterbacks as well, go get what they deserve too. But Jalen is, you know, what Jalen did this year is pretty amazing. And who knows where the sky's the limit for this guy. He's just a terrific player, and like I said, seems like a real grounded, down to earth guy.
It definitely, I mean, definitely so. And I think that also speaks to the Alabama program, right? Because you have a guy like you said who was off the bench, and he's performing in the NFL like many of their players that they go to the NFL. So Nick Saban obviously is a great coach, but I think it really I think it's speaks to him as well.
Well, Nick benched him, and Nick and then he transferred and ended up at Oklahoma and did what he did. So of course Alabama's just got so many athletes and players coming through there. It's amazing, and what this guy's done there has been certainly uncharted waters. So
dare I say, they're this generation's version of the University of Miami.
Yeah, well, the thing is, the difference is he stayed. I mean, Nick has stayed there, and the fact that he stayed there. I mean, if Jimmy Johnson stayed or Howard Schnellenberger stayed back in the '80s, it might have been different for Miami. But Alabama, the money supply was limitless. At Miami, as a private school, it isn't. So unfortunately, all dynasties usually come to an end at some point. But Saban's still rolling, so God bless him. He's a tremendous coach, a tremendous recruiter, amazing at what he does. So good for him. And like I said, good for Jalen Hurts. And hopefully moving forward, good for some of these other good young quarterbacks.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting to see. And we'll be talking more about that, obviously, as the draft nears, sometime this month. So that'll be, I think we're going to see a little bit more action with regards to that leading into that. But switching gears, going into baseball, wow, what a hot start I didn't expect this. I mean, the Rays are a good team, which is really frustrating for me, right? But it's I make fun of them a lot, but I mean, what they do is amazing. You know what I mean? Like how they adapt. They went from for example, having starters, right, starting that trend, to now having 5 legit real starters, right?
Yep.
And they just kind of adapt to whatever is in front of them, and that's a credit to their farm system, to their front office. So you got to give them props.
No, look, the Rays it's unbelievable what they do and how they do it, because like you said, you weren't expecting it from them, but no one ever expects anything from them. But yet they always compete and they always exceed expectations, and they always seem to be there in the end. And you just have to give credit to that whole front office and their system that they're doing, because it's kind of proving the new generation, because it's always, you get those arguments, and I'm an old school guy myself, but I also feel that I'm also open-minded when it comes to certain things, and especially when it comes to analytics, because those things are only things that can help you in the end. Should they be the be-all, end-all? To me, no. That's where I kind of differ maybe on some things, but the Rays, what they have done and how they've done it is nothing short of remarkable, and their start to the season this year is incredible, and it's historic. And where it ends, we don't know, but the fact that they've been able to get onto this hot start is incredible.
To me, what's fascinating is them being able, yes, the talent and everything else, but them being able to retain people in the front office of that mindset, right? And you had the Friedman who went to the Dodgers, but like they still have these guys who are there, and are pushing what they're pushing, and their coaching staff is pretty remarkable. It pretty much is. Again, I can't nothing but impressed by them as a whole. There's just a great organization, and it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight for the East for sure.
No doubt, no doubt. On the other end of the spectrum, Houston's off to a slow start, which I don't think anybody expected because they've been such a juggernaut and coming off obviously the great 2022 season. But obviously there is a common denominator in that fact that they kind of lost their heart and soul with Jose Altuve getting hurt in the WBC.
Yeah.
And to lose him for an extended period of time, which they have, has been really a killer for them. I think he's just the heart and soul of that organization.
No, I agree. Do you go also to that the hangover effect that people always talk about after winning a World Series, because you play a little bit longer, you reap the rewards, right? The talk shows, the appearances, maybe you're not as focused. I don't necessarily think that's true with a veteran team.
It could be, but I mean, I think more likely the fact that they're missing a guy who's just all around great baseball player, great hitter, great fielder, great chemistry guy, good human being, team leader, who does what he does is a crushing blow to a great team.
No, I agree. I mean, and you can kind of sense it, right? Because the lineup doesn't feel the same, without him there, right? Yes, they're a solid team. You got Jordan and you got Bregman rather. But when you're missing that one catalyst at the top, and who's a stud, it's hard, right? It's hard. So, I'm not, by that point, I'm not surprised. I still think they would have been better because they're still a good team without him, right? But again, that just goes to show you, the competitiveness right now that's in baseball. So, they're going to be there at some level. So
I agree.
It's not like they're going to be in last place, but
no, they'll be there in the end. And I would be surprised if they weren't. In my opinion, I think they'll be there in the end.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how the season has started and how some teams have gotten off to great starts and others haven't. And we'll see how it goes. Obviously, baseball, more than any other sport, 162 games. It's a grind, and it's not where you start, it's where you finish, right?
Without question. I wasn't going to go into this, but I just thought of Jacob deGrom the other night. Pitched 4 no-hit innings, and he pulls himself out, because precaution. And I was thinking about this, and I'm like, this is what's so frustrating about this guy. And this is why I just think him going to Texas, I mean, he went for the money, right? We know that is what it is. But I think that just tells you that I think the Mets kind of knew something and just didn't want to deal with that, right? Because he's not promised to you for any specific amount of time because you don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe. I think Jacob deGrom went where he wanted to go, in my opinion.
Yeah.
At least from what I know, I think he didn't really want to be in New York anymore. I think he's wanted to be away from it. He wanted to be on a farm somewhere, and having no state tax and a team willing to pay him what they paid him were added bonuses for him. But I just think he went where he wanted to go, and I think the Mets, obviously the Mets still spent a lot of money, and look what's happened to their pitching. So which is a whole nother story, because they're banking on Verlander, and Verlander hasn't even pitched yet for them. And, Scherzer got pushed back a start, and, they've had multiple injuries across. Carrasco just went on the DL. Quintana. I mean, so it's, it's
how
tough.
Do you as an agent, do you notice I don't want to say the decline, because it's not a decline, but do you notice the difference from a player year to year? Like, hey, his fastball is down a lick, or his swing is not as fast as it was.
You can. It just depends. I think it all just depends on the player, and obviously, nobody stays the same, and the player you are when you're 22 isn't the player you are when you're 32, and if you're lucky enough to stick around long enough when you're 42. So it just depends. Everybody's different, and everybody has a different time of when they're in their prime or when they kick up their game. Sometimes when you're 24, you're not at your best, and then you get to 30, you are your best, and then anytime you're 30, 34, you're on the decline. So it just depends on player to player. But of course, you notice different things with players, and I've been doing this long enough to see guys come up as top prospects and retire into the sunset, and everything in the middle. So,
which guy always comes to mind that was like a shooting star and just flamed out was Greg Jeffries.
Greg Jeffries, an old Met. For those who don't remember him, Greg Jeffries came. Well, the thing about Greg Jeffries was he came in with a lot of fanfare. He came to a hot team, the Mets in the late 80s. He had a lot of hype on a team that had a lot of personalities and a lot of egos. And he really he had a big ego, and he kind of clashed with his veteran teammates. And what they had hoped for from him didn't really happen, but he ended up having a very good career. He had
a solid year, a
good
solid
career with the Cardinals and stuff. But Greg Jeffries that's a name from the past. But Greg Jeffries was a guy who had a big article written on him, I think, in Sports Illustrated about his hitting techniques, how his dad had him swinging in the pool and in California, and he was just a really keen eye hitter, switch hitter who could was known for just being an outstanding young hitter. But he really struggled early in his career, and ended up at the end kind of blending in and being a good productive
serviceable player.
Well, I think he was a little better than that, but I mean, I've never really looked at his numbers, but but he was but he was in a tough situation because he was, he came in with so much fanfare and hype, and the Mets had a lot of egos in their locker room at that time, and they didn't, players don't like that when you come in, and if you're not humble, and I don't know how, I don't, the word was that he wasn't that humble. This is before my time, but like he wasn't that humble, and that made it tough.
No, that's crazy. That's a funny story. I wanted to touch base. Another thing that really kind of caught my eye this week was the Oakland A's and their stadium situation, which obviously, as everyone knows, is horrible. They have the worst stadium in all of baseball. And, where does this lead to, right? Are they going to Vegas? There was rumors that I just saw recently about, Charlotte and Nashville and even Utah, believe it or not, they're looking for a team. And it's really sad, man, because this is such a great franchise. I mean, we can go down the laundry list of, Raleigh Fingers and Gene Tennis, those Bert Campaneris, those Oakland A's teams of the 70s. And then obviously you have the McGuires and, Canseco's and Carney Lansfords, Dave Stewart's. And it's just, it's sad, man, because it's like, I don't know what Major League Baseball can do. I don't think they can do anything. I mean, it's really frustrating as a fan, and listen, if you're a player and you're being drafted and you see Oakland is up next, that player's like, I hope they pass me, because it's just, you're not going to be in a situation where you're going to be with that team for a long period of time, right? Because the minute you're any good, you're going to get traded. And then you're going to be, or if, as you're starting, you're going to be in a constant rebuild. So that stadium situation is horrible, man.
No, it's a tough situation. And it's interesting, I think, in that how these stadiums hold up. Look, I was watching the Mets game from Dodger Stadium, and Dodger Stadium is built in 1962. It's such a beautiful stadium still to this day. And I just don't understand how, it's just upkeep, I guess, and how things are taken care of. And it's just unfortunate that the Oakland Coliseum, which probably was a sight to behold at one time or another, has turned out the way it has. And it's unfortunate because there are a lot of great fans in Oakland and in the Bay Area that have supported that team through the years and had, like you said, a great history within the organization.
Let me tell you, it wasn't a bad stadium up until when the Raiders put those bleachers in center field. But prior to that, you had like an open field, the grass field behind center field. It was really nice. And I mean, I just saw an article where they had like zip ties holding a door open or some craziness. And I'm like, you're a Major League Baseball stadium.
Someone says there's a muskrat in the press box or something.
Yes. I saw that too.
I don't know what's going on there.
Oh my God! It makes the Tropicana fields look like course fields, for that matter.
Ken Davidoff is joining us here, and Ken, you're driving. I see you're driving. You're very snappily dressed, but it's for a sad occasion.
Yeah, I do look like a man in black, don't I? But I had a friend's mother's funeral, a lovely woman I had the privilege of knowing, so it was definitely a sad occasion.
Sorry and condolences to you and the family. Ken, this is Lou. Lou is my longtime friend of mine, and he's the fan and the agent in the fan on our podcast here.
Pleasure to meet you, Lou.
Likewise, Ken. Big fan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, Ken, obviously, you and I have known each other a long time. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. What do you remember? Do you remember? I mean, like when I first met you, or do you remember meeting me? My memory is kind of bad.
Well, I certainly remember you working under Jay Horowitz with the Mets. What years were those?
That was in the late 90s. So
okay.
Yeah, that's definitely when it was. I don't remember specifically when or where I met you.
I can't say I remember the first time our eyes met and we shook hands. But I definitely remember. So late '90s, I was a Yankees beat writer, but with the Subway Series,
that could be it.
I would. There were some interactions, and I did know Jay and Shannon. May Shannon rest in peace. I don't remember what year Ethan joined, but
Ethan joined when I left. I groomed Ethan to replace me.
Wow, holy cow! So yeah, but I covered the Mets like in 95, 96, 97, and I got to know Jay and Shannon very well. And then you and I got to know each other sometime not long after that.
Correct. And who were you writing with back then? Ken.
Chris, I lost you for a second. What'd you say?
Who were you writing with back then? Who were you writing with when you first started?
The Bergen Record, your hometown paper.
Yeah, my hometown paper. That's right. Okay, now it's all coming together. No, that's right. Well, listen, that's look, you're somebody I've known a long time. I got a lot of respect for you and what you do and how you go about your business. And Lou, again, we've worked together. Lou is the fan. Lou is I did no idea when I asked you to come on the show, but it turns out Lou really is a big fan of yours, and he's enjoyed your writing through the years. And Lou, first tell Ken what you were just telling me before about him.
The one thing that I said about you, Ken, was that I always respected your writing. Right? I grew up. I'm a diehard Yankee fan, but the one thing was you shoot straight from the hip. It was what it was. You weren't trying to placate anybody and make be buddies with anybody. You told the story, good or bad, how it was, and that's, as a fan, I always appreciated that.
It's very kind of you to say, Lou, and that makes me feel good because that's what I strove to do. And I have to say that job got harder as time marched on, just because of social media and the scrutiny, and every word was analyzed. The public, which is fine. There was a positive overanalyzed, but the positive trade-off was that it helped me boost my brand. But I really do appreciate saying that, and that was certainly one of my primary goals was to make that impression on readers.
To that point, do you think with social media, obviously we know what it is now, and but when you first started to get that taste of it, how much of a change was that for you in terms of covering the team?
It was significant. No, social media was definitely one of the more significant developments in the many years that I did that job. When you talk about first on the ground level, just interacting with your readers on a real personal, immediate level, right? And then second, when it got to a point where like, someone I wrote about might tweet at me, right, or might tweet about me, and that certainly raised the stakes as well. And I remember one funny story is I wrote a big story about the Astros, about the cheating sign stealing scandal, and all the back and forth. And I remember one time, like Lance McCullers Jr., like, I was trying to find his Twitter account, and I was like, oh my gosh, Lance McCullers Jr. blocked me on Twitter. And I was like, okay, like it's a free country, that's his prerogative. But I remember that stuck with me. Like, wow, I guess I'm making an impression, good or bad.
No, that's, listen, I think a lot of these guys, they're a little sensitive. Let's just say a little sensitive, right? But I've always appreciated the player that was accountable, good or bad, great game, bad game. He was accountable and he stood up there, because I was always of the belief, and Chris and I have had this conversation before, where I don't want a player in this town who doesn't want to be here, because he'll never be the best version of himself if he's always fighting with the media or not happy being where he is.
Yeah, well, I agree with you 1,000%, Lou. Obviously, I have some biases implicit in that, but yeah, I saw a lot of players over the years, covering baseball in New York for 25 years. A lot of guys, the media, that was a real factor in their ability to succeed or not. And it's funny, Chris and I were texting earlier about the success of the Rays, all these years, and I honestly think they are.
Oh boy.
It's very easy to play there.
Hold on, Lou.
Relative.
Wait, Ken, you cut out just as you were about to make the big point about the Rays. You went blank and no.
Yeah, I think I got a phone call. That's why. So the point I was trying to make was that, all the credit in the world to the Rays. They're a brilliant organization. What they accomplished on their minuscule budgets, their tiny payrolls. But in addition to that, I think guys enjoy playing there because the media is so small there, and there just isn't the same sort of dynamic there.
No question. No
question.
And I think also, Ken, and obviously I know this firsthand with the influx of Latino players, and even more so for most Latino players, they don't, they just want to play the game. They don't want to speak about everything and every last point. And I think in a small market, it's so much easier to just do that. Whereas in a big market, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, I certainly encountered some Latino players over the years who handled the New York scrutiny and media quite well.
No question.
And some, but there's no doubt about that. The media is a real factor in players' happiness, good or bad.
Yeah. So, Ken, touching on what Chris just mentioned about the Latin player, how hard was it, or easy, if at all, to kind of decide, the lost in translation of somebody, speaking in Spanish, obviously in their language, and trying to make their point across, in English, and kind of feeling like, am I saying the right thing, or is it being translated the way I want it to be translated?
That's a huge thing, and I'll tell you, Lou, you just touched a nerve inadvertently, because one of the criticisms I hear that drives me crazy, is when a Latino player, or for that matter, a Japanese player, uses an interpreter. Like, what's wrong with him? Why won't he learn English? It's like, because it's, first of all, many of them do speak English privately, but aren't comfortable speaking it publicly. And second of all, for what you just said, because things get lost in translation. And now it's collectively bargained that they're entitled to an interpreter. And by all means, they should use one if that's what they're more comfortable doing. So, yeah, and I would certainly, over the years, I think I grew increasingly sympathetic and understanding to those players who prefer to use interpreters in interviews, especially because of social media, every word they said was overanalyzed.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And to your point as well, with the influx of the Japanese player now, that's also becoming an issue there as well.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that because the Japanese, I know I represent a few Japanese players, obviously after representing a lot of Latin players, and then before and after, and it's amazing. That's one of the things. A lot of Latin players were like, "Why did they get an interpreter? I'm from another country too. English isn't my first language either." But they were the Latin players were just expected, where all the Japanese players had one built right into their contract. So, I mean, like you said, Ken, I think it's a good thing that they've collectively bargained because, like you said, a lot of the players are good at getting their point across, but don't feel comfortable that they're articulating themselves the way they want to articulate themselves.
Yeah, I agree. And again, especially where we are now, frankly, not only where the world is, but where, as we become more and more divisive, as a country,
Yep.
Yeah.
it seems like the anger on this issue has only risen.
Yeah, and also the other thing is La Melaza, Jose Reyes. He makes fun of the guys who struggle to speak, including himself, but when they try and speak English.
He has one particular person that he really gets into.
Oh, well, yeah.
Encarnacion.
Yeah.
those. But I think, Chris, with Jose, I think that's a great thing, right? Like, I think them getting more comfortable in their environment and being able to, have someone to bounce something off of is key.
Yes,
and to Dave and to Ken's point, like, you're going to feel more comfortable and you're going to feel better, and maybe that translates to you being better on the field because you don't have that stress on you.
100%, no question about it.
But Ken, talk to us about how you started all of this. How did you start? What did you kind of fall into this, or was it something that you kind of focused on in college?
No, this was when I was 7 years old. I decided that I wanted to be the Yankees beat writer, and I was blessed enough to achieve my dream. Yeah, so starting in high school and then in college, this is what I pursued and what I wanted to do. This was very much by design, not by accident.
So you pulled the Babe Ruth. You called your shot.
I guess you could say that. That's.
So who gave you your first shot?
So my very first job out of college was at a small newspaper in Woodbridge, New Jersey, called the News Tribune. A gentleman named Jim Miller hired me right out of college to cover Middlesex County high school sports, and it was like 20 hours a week. I was fortunate enough that my parents brought me back home after college. I grew up in Middlesex County. So that's how I got my start, and I was very fortunate.
That's amazing.
Ken, so to talk about a little bit about some of your experiences in 25 years of covering Major League Baseball, tell what's the best baseball team, talking about on the field, you've covered?
That's an easy one, Chris. 1998 Yankees. They were remarkable. And that was my first year as the full beat writer. Like in 97, I was what we call backup beat writer to Bob Clappish and Rafael Hermoso, if you remember Rafi.
Yeah, sure.
So I was their backups for the Yankees and Mets at the record. And I think they promoted Clapp, and I think Rafi might have left. But I got the Yankees.
Where did Raf go?
Well, at that juncture, I think he went to the Daily News, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
They gave me the Yankees beat. So 98 was like my first time in the deep end of the pool. And my gosh, what an experience to be your first, the team that had the record for most regular season wins. That record didn't last very long, only lasted 3 years, but still the record for most combined regular season and postseason wins in one season, 125, and just an absolutely phenomenal team.
Did it feel that as you're going through that? Mm-hmm. Did it feel like that? Like, hey, this team is unstoppable, or was that kind of later on?
No, well, they started off, I think it was 1-4, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was 1-4. But so at that point you were wondering, rumblings about Joe Torre being fired. But once, I think then they proceeded to win at least 7 in a row. So once they got rolling, by the end of April, let's put it that way, it was pretty evident this was a very, very special team. So, by the time they reached the postseason, I would have been pretty surprised had they not won the whole thing.
Yeah, that was a great team. Who would you consider? I mean, we know Jeter's the captain, yes, but who would you consider the leader of that team?
Yeah, he wasn't the captain yet at that point. He became the captain in 2003.
2003, yeah.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, that team had a lot of leaders, a lot of veterans. You talk about David Cohen on the pitching staff, and then you talk about even like some of the role players. They had Darryl Strawberry, Chili Davis, and Tim Raines all on their roster. Those guys all debuted in the early 80s, so they were all nearly 20 years of big league service, each of them. So, when you talk about leadership, that trio was pretty remarkable. Then you talk about Paul O'Neill, you talk about Tino Martinez, Joe Girardi. So that team was chock full of leaders, and Jeter was only in his 3rd full season, but it was very clear what his trajectory was, and then he was a leader himself.
A lot of winners on that team.
Yes, indeed.
Ken, what about the best? Is it maybe the same answer, but what was the best team to cover for you?
Like the most fun?
The most fun team to cover.
Maybe the most fun. Yeah, let's say the most fun.
Gosh, that's a great question. Yeah, if I've been around the 86, I'm not quite that old. Gosh, that's a really good question. What was really fun was like those Mets, like the Omar Mets, like the 05, 06, with Jose and David Wright and Carlos Beltran, and then Carlos Delgado, Pedro, Tom Glavine, Billy Wagner. That team had a lot of big personalities, and most of them were pretty media friendly. So, Willie Randolph was the manager, and Omar was, of course, great. So I might say that, so by that point, I wasn't the beat writer, I was a baseball columnist, but I spent a lot of time around those Mets teams, and they were definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's a good call.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that one.
What about your best interview? Was there somebody that was your bet? Like, this is the guy I love to chat it up with?
Well, you know what? When people ask me that, and the person who comes to mind first is Hideki Matsui.
Wow.
I just had such a fondness for him, and he was just such a good guy. When we talk about scrutiny and overanalysis, this guy, he had like an army of Japanese media covering his every single move, and he handled it with such grace. And then he dealt with the American media too. He had an interpreter. I remember I established a nice bond with him, and I was really excited because I think he gave me an interview right like the day before the World Series started in 2003 when he was a rookie, and like he was telling me about his experiences driving in New York City on the FDR highway, and for me it was like a really good get, just to get him to reveal these things. I remember all the other Japanese media coming back. That was a good interview you got with Hideki Matsui. I was always very fond of him. I just think he was a terrific guy.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have had him at the top of the list. My guess is, if I had to take take my own guess at who you would say. So that's a really cool and interesting answer.
Yeah, I love Godzilla.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's awesome. That would be a great interview. That would definitely be a great interview, for sure.
And what about the most interesting human being that you've covered?
Doesn't have to be sports.
Oh, I have to say George Steinbrenner. He was just so fascinating. Just I've never seen someone so tireless and really just so. What's the word I'm trying to think of? I mean, he could be a really, really nice person and a really, really mean person. He had incredible range. So
I know a lot of those.
yeah, there were times when he could be so charming and funny, and like Chris, David Lennon, like I feel like he just loved to put Dave Lennon in headlocks, which nowadays that wouldn't play well nowadays. Back in 1997, 98, it was okay. But then we would see him when he was just like volcanically mad after a bad loss, or even after a win that wasn't great. And obviously it was my job to hear the stories of when he was verbally abusive of his employees, and oftentimes report when he misbehaved behind the scenes. So yeah, George was, and then I also really just like a really book smart guy, very learned, and just a fascinating human being.
And Ken, how would you rate Larry David's version of George Steinbrenner from Seinfeld?
It was pretty good. He had, he just had the cadence right. He had the yeah, and then just like the pivot. I think probably the pivoting from one subject to the next, that was a little exaggerated, but just he definitely found something in there, and definitely struck on it.
That's so funny.
That would be, it's funny. That would be a great interview because George was so all over the place. He was such, I think he was larger than life is what it was, is what comes to me. Larger than life.
No doubt.
That's amazing.
What about Ken? How about the best player you've ever seen play as a baseball player?
I mean, I probably have to say Shohei Ohtani, just because of what he's doing.
Wow. Yeah.
But beyond him, I probably have to say A-Rod. I mean, whatever, we can debate what he was using and when he was using it and how we feel about all of that. But when you just talk about performance on the field and all 5 tools, and just the talent that he was, I probably would have to go with A-Rod.
Yeah, no, I mean, all that stuff obviously is overshadowed everything, but I agree, man. Like that's a talent, to play shortstop and then come to New York and play third base. The fielding, the home runs, and he was clutch in the playoffs, towards the end when it counted. So,
and he also put $4+ million into the stadium at University of Miami. So I'm happy about that.
Exactly. That's their baseball field.
Correct. What about the most unforgettable moment that you've covered over the 25 years, Ken?
Chris, I would have to say the events after 9/11, most unforgettable.
Yes.
So I was still the Yankees beat writer at that juncture. So I was not at the famous Piazza home run game. I was not, fortunate enough to be there. But I mean, I've probably watched that 100 times, and every time I choke up.
Yep.
I've just never seen anything like that.
Yeah.
And then on the Yankees side, the way they played in that postseason, they were down 2-0 to the A's, who were the clearly superior team, and they come back to win on the Jeter flip play and a bunch of other heroics. And then the World Series, games 4 and 5, both games down to their last out, and game tying 2-run home runs. Tino Martinez and Scott Brosius back to back, and 2 nights in a row, just incredible. And again, I remember feeling it was my job to not get emotional, right, to not get caught up in the moment. I remember when Brosius hit that home run second straight night, and just be like, oh my God, and like I just started like choking up because of everything in the air. 9/11 was still so fresh, and I knew people who died that day, and just thinking of those people and their families, and this crazy moment, how people were rallying around it. It was hard not to get emotional when all that happened.
Sure. Wow. No, that makes a lot of sense. Listen, Ken, I know you have to run. I had a bunch more stuff for you.
I know.
Listen,
bring me back, baby. Bring me back.
We'll bring you back. We'll bring it back. But
we appreciate it, Ken.
Yeah, Ken, thanks so much for taking the time on your ride back, and we appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun to have you, and obviously, you know, you've been a good friend through the years, and I appreciate you coming on, supporting the show, and looking forward to talking to you more in the future.